All right. Well, welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us on episode 11. I think we are, Gal,
Is it 11
of
or
the Edge
12,
Group
or is
podcast.
there like a missing episode, or I don't know. I don't want to talk about it, but it just
No, I think we went straight from 10 to 11.
okay.
And here with us today is Bob Steinbugler, who we're honored to host as an amazing designer, an incredible life story, a huge motorcycle aficionado, and a quite successful business that he's turned into, which we're very excited to learn about. So, Bob, welcome to the group to this podcast today.
Thank you.
And you have an incredible history of industrial design, all the way from I want to say the big blue, right? All the way
Yes.
to motorcycles and everything in between. And I looked up your LinkedIn, and it said Bachelor of Science, Master of Arts, Electrical and Electronic Engineering, Industrial Design, Master of Arts. I said it already, and from Cornell University. Any degrees that I'm missing?
That would be correct, but you're missing a little bit of architecture in there too. So, but they're all kind of related: engineering, architecture, and product design.
From Cornell.
Yeah.
Nice. And then you turned into a full-time motorcycle builder, and then an importer, a collector. How many? And you run the Bimota Spirit museum and shop. So how many
Correct.
motorcycles do you have right now in your collection?
I don't know. I don't count them. There's probably maybe 100. There's probably a few more. The number changes on a regular basis, and it's not about numbers. It's about the passion of being a bike collector.
That's what I'm trying to explain to my girlfriend every time I have more than a few motorcycles in my garage. How did you explain it to the wife?
Well, my wife is extremely understanding, and we have always had kind of she's a career professional designer as well. So we've always kind of had a parallel financial system. And as long as I don't take money from, the grocery bill and the rent bill, I'm free to do with my money whatever I want to do. So no questions asked. And she likes motorcycles, so that helps a little bit.
Well, how do you
Right.
decide? How do you decide which motorcycle to take to the store today? Just any, mini,
What was
miny,
that?
mo. How do you decide which motorcycle you want to ride on today?
Um, Pretty much where I'm going and what I'm going to do. Um, if it's to run an errand, it's one bike. If it's to go out by myself and have a little bit of fun, it's a different bike. And if my wife and I are going up someplace to dinner, then it's a different bike.
Which ones are your most favorites in your collection?
Well, now it's Bimotas. I've had a very, very long history with many different bikes, but about in the early '90s, I got really interested in Bimota, and when I got my first Tezzy, and ever since then, it's just been sort of weeding out all the other things and trying to focus because there's so many cool bikes in this world. If you had the resources, you could have 1,000 bikes, and one of the ways I've recently been trying to focus myself is just say if it's not a Bimota or something that I had when I was 20 years old, then I've just got to get rid of it and stay focused.
There's
You
good insight on how to build a collection. And what got you passionate about motorcycles in the first place?
Um, Getting out of the house and independence, like every other 14-year-old kid, it's like I had a bit of a dominating father, and I just really needed to get some independence. And my very first bike was a Suzuki X6 Hustler, a little 250 two-stroke with six forward speeds. I could beat any Harley on the street, and I was just really, really having fun. My first big bike was a Triumph Bonneville, and my first Italian bike was a Moto Guzzi V7 Sport. So being a a professional design person, Italy has always been the Mecca for design. It's the Mecca for design, for fashion, for automobiles, for products, for whatever. And I had never really made that connection in motorcycle world until I stumbled upon a Moto Guzzi V7 Sport, and that changed my perspective about the whole motorcycle thing. And then I focused on the Guzzis and the Ducatis and Benellis and Labradas, and when we started our business, we actually imported a few Bimota kits because Bimota wasn't making complete motorcycles in the early days, and we built them for our customers. And once you saw the level of detail and the precision and the design excellence, both from an aesthetic point of view and a functional point of view, from a design person, from an engineering person, it really was the place for me to go.
Yeah,
That's terrific.
I remember the Delario and all those old Guzzis. They just looked like a different planet. They came from different planet. They were so good looking, and the old Laverdas.
Correct.
And I think they were competing against the Yamaha's XS back in the day. And it was like riding different motorcycles. I remember riding in Guzzi versus I had a 1979 XS 400, and it was like a different world.
Yes, absolutely.
You were also a racer.
I was back when we first started I worked for IBM for many years as my real job that paid the bills, and but as soon as I got my first Moto Guzzi, a partner and I wanted to start a motorcycle shop, and we did. So he would watch it during the week, and then I would watch it on the weekends when he had to work weekends. So, and we became franchise Moto Guzzi Ducati dealers. And so then we decided that would be the perfect platform to go racing. So our shop never made a penny of profit. We managed to spend every penny of profit on the racing program. And so we basically worked a second job to pay for racing, and that's how we did it. And it worked out perfectly. We raced Moto Guzzi V7 Sport, and then we moved up to a Moto Guzzi Le Mans 1, and then a Moto Guzzi Le Mans 3, and then I switched over to a Ducati bevel drive 750 Sport, and my partner switched over to a Ducati F1 shortly after that, the original 750, and then I wasn't ready to go to that Ducati F1. I was a little bit older, and the writing was on the wall. I mean, when that bike came out, it was 50 pounds lighter than my Guzzi, which had been stripped to the bare bone. And, if you race a motorcycle, you can't give your competition a 50-pound weight advantage, because every time you get to the hard braking, they go flying by while you're trying to wrestle this truck to the ground. So that was the perfect time for me to retire.
Did you ever ride Santa Monica one? The Ducati Santa Monica?
The F1 Santa Monica?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that was a very pretty. They made the Montjuic, they made the Santa Monica, they made 3 different versions of that one.
And then they made the Pazzo, I remember.
As a matter of fact, the Bimota DB1 has got Montjuic engines in it. The very last bunch that they built got the hot engines. They were built for a guy in California who was the owner of the Bimota Owners Club. And after the DB1 had been stopped production, they were so popular here in America that he went to the factory and asked them if they could build a handful more, and he would buy them. And they contacted Ducati, and Ducati had stopped production of the engines, but they looked in the old race shop, and apparently they found 7 or 8 Santa Monica or Montjuic engines that were still brand new, that were left over as spares for the racing program. And they sold them to Bimota, and Bimota built 8 more DB1s.
Nice.
Oh, wow. What's your fondest racing memory?
I don't know if my fondest racing memory, but we started out doing endurance racing, and if you've ever been part of a team doing endurance racing, we had 4 riders, and back in those days, we did 24 and 30-hour races. So you could start at like 6 o'clock on Saturday morning, and when the sun starts to come up Sunday morning at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the morning, you're coming around and you're exhausted, and it occurs to you still have 6 more hours to go. And it was just absolutely deflating to know that you still had to do this. But, my partners and I won the 30 hours of Rockingham one year. So that was probably the best experience.
Yeah, win's always a good thing. So what's in endurance racing, besides the endurance of the rider and I guess bike reliability, where are the kind of important criteria to be up there and win?
Well, I have to tell you, that's why we started with the Moto Guzzi, because the Moto Guzzi is probably, sorry about that. Want to start over again?
Nah.
The reliability, the reliability issue in endurance racing. That's the reason we started with the Moto Guzzi, because that Moto Guzzi engine actually was originally developed for an army vehicle for the Italian army, and it's super, super, super simple and overbuilt. So I mean, we could race the whole season with just the little valve refresh, and the thing was bulletproof. We never ever had a mechanical failure with that engine.
Oh wow!
I don't want to ask about the electrical, but have you ever had an electrical? Why are you laughing, Bill?
Have I ever had an electrical bike?
Electrical issues with the Guzzi.
Oh, electrical issues? No. With the Guzzi, the original Guzzi, they had a points ignition, so they were horrible. But you put a Dyna ignition on it, and now you had contact-less points. We put XL coils on them, so we put some American technology in the electrical area, but it had the same, and we ran total loss, so we didn't have that problem. And so, no, I mean, all you really needed was, a battery, a couple of spark plugs, and something to tell it when to go. And we did have lights, though, because 24-hour races, you had to have lights, but all that stuff was always German. It was Hella and stuff like that. So we never had any electrical issues. That was long before computers. It was long before crappy voltage regulators and rectifiers, and so they were pretty robust. The only time we really stopped endurance racing is when we crashed, and we did that fairly often.
So what are the rules? Can you pick up your bike and keep going if it still runs?
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, one time we were at a 24-hour race in Rockingham, North Carolina, and the thing that was amazing about those experiences were we would have 4 guys. So 2 guys would go on and off, hour on, hour off, hour on, hour off, and then you'd get a 4-hour break to catch a little bit of sleep. But we were sleeping in a tent. And so I was having one of my 1-hour offs in the middle of the night with my partner. And even though you're sleeping, you could hear that V-twin come around every single lap in your subconscious while you're sleeping. And all of a sudden, I just sprang up because it didn't come around. And we had to figure out, where it was, had to go get it. We had got it. We brought it back to the pits. Well, my business partner was also at the races, and he had ridden his street bike Le Mans 1 down to the weekend, and he was asleep. So my real partner and I stole the entire front end off of his motorcycle. We disconnected the triple clamps. We took the entire front end from his street bike, we put it on the race bike, and we got going again. And we just kind of put a big tarp over his bike. And my partner woke up the next morning and had no earthly idea that this had happened. And we ended up, I think, second. We got a trophy, so we got probably didn't win, but we probably got second or third. And because we missed 45 minutes swapping out the front end. And when my partner saw that we had actually stolen parts off of his brand new motorcycle, he went ballistic. He went up. I said, wait a minute. We're going to put it back on. Don't worry about it. You can ride home. Just, let us rest here a little bit after the race is over, and we'll fix you back up. You can ride back home.
So how long was your racing career?
About 10 years. So from 1979 to about 1989.
Were they all crazy adventures like that? Sounds like you could write a book.
Absolutely, because we were poor. We didn't have any real sponsors other than our bike shop, and so everything was on a shoestring. The nice thing about those racing days, I will tell you, is that especially in some of the classes, like the twins classes, it was really not just about buying a bike in a store and putting a pipe on it and going racing. It was really about innovation. It was about I'm on the bike riding it, so I want to beat you as a human being to another human being, but I'm also the engineer back at the shop, and I'm also the craftsman back at the shop, and I want to try to figure out a way to make my bike better than your bike, because we had almost no rules because they were super bike rules. So, for example, our Le Mans 1 had a monoshop. It was the only Moto Guzzi, to my knowledge, before they came out with Dr. John's bike that had a monoshop. And the rules said that I got protested every week, but the rules said you could relocate the shocks. So we did. We relocated the left shock to the middle and the right shock to the trash bin. And that worked out perfectly. We relocated the shocks. Those were the rules. And our bike outhandled every other bike on the track. It was just fantastic. Because we can imagine going from two spindly little 1970s rear shocks to this massive, it was a big Coney that we put in the middle, and the bike just handled superbly. But those were the kind of things. And then when you beat somebody, you felt like, well, not only did I outride you, but I also outthought you, and I out-engineered you. And it was a total package. It was really grassroots stuff, but it was great fun.
Yeah, those grassroots
that
races.
Sounds a lot.
Yeah.
I'm saying is it sounds a lot more fun than just taking quasi-identical bikes and then
Correct.
racing them, which, then, of course, it's the talent of the rider, but then the other dimensions don't exist, which sounds like a lot of fun.
Correct. And being an engineer and a design person, that was the part that we enjoyed the most. And it was very satisfying.
Yeah, today racing is mostly about cameras looking if you moved an inch off the track and then giving you 5 seconds penalty, and I don't think that's the spirit of racing.
No.
Yeah. Well, that's a little bit the specialty of Gigi Dall'Igna, right? So, he's reputed to be the guy who takes the rule book and peels it and tries to figure out what are the loopholes and builds something, and then Honda protests, and then Ducati wins, and then they stay on top for 2 years, and then somebody catches up.
Yeah, Ducati were always known for bending the rules, so good on them.
It's okay. Honda makes the rules, so it's okay if Ducati bends them.
Well,
we'll used
see.
to, at least.
We'll see what they come up with. I mean, did you see what was that race where Marquez crashed so many times? He was like, "Yeah, I'm not even racing anymore." He just crashed like 4 times in practice. And he was like, I just can't ride that thing. So,
well, it was very telling back in the day. I mean, that Honda's been that way for a long time. There's been only one human being that can actually tame that thing, and that's been Marquez for the last 6, 7, 8, 9 years. So was leaving Ducati to go back to Honda at the very end. And someone interviewed Cal Crutchlow and said, who was the second Honda rider at the time, and said, "Do you think Lorenzo's going to be able to come back and win another world championship?" He says, "Poor Jorge, he has no idea what he just got into." He said, "The bike that he's going to try to ride is unrideable. There's only one human being in the world that can ride that thing. And if you watch him, he crashes 2 or 3 times a race, but he's so good he saves it every time." And Marquez was famous for that. He would literally crash and figure out a way to pop it back up through some magic and go on to win. But that bike was really, really, and it still is, really, really difficult.
Yeah, and the guy rides like an animal. I mean, he just you
Yeah.
can tell he just
Well,
wants to be
he
first.
used to ride like an animal, but as you said, the weekend he crashed 5 times. He decided that no matter how hard I ride, I'm not going to win on this thing, and I'm not going to crash 5 times to finish 10th. So I think he's backed it off a little bit.
Yeah, it's the same. It used to be the same with Rossi, where there was a time where he didn't accept that he's not gonna win anymore, and
Right.
he was out riding himself, and he was trying everything, but you could tell that whatever made that magic is it's just that the last little 100 of a thing that you have when you're braking and you're accelerating. It wasn't there anymore, and he couldn't accept it. And I think Marquez is also at the same point where he can't accept it. And I think his level of riding, if he's going to switch to Ducati right now, he still has a lot of podiums in him. But I don't think that's I don't think he's going to
Yeah.
switch.
Mm.
I don't think there's a seat for him.
That's the problem. There's some rumors he might go to KTM, but I don't think there's a Ducati seat around.
Oh.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see him on a KTM because that bike seems a little tricky to ride, but they got the power and they can turn. So with a good talented rider,
Well, but the nice thing about KTM is they're still young and they're still improving, and they have a lot of passion. So, I mean, I think going forward, that bike is going to continue to get better and better and better. And so, going there with the idea that you're going to be part of that journey is probably better for Marquez at this point than staying on the Honda, because that's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
right? That would be fun to see. And I mean, I don't think Honda will quit. Otherwise, we'll end up with a Ducati Cup. There's two factory and 20 satellite teams, and it's
Yeah,
pretty much
yeah.
It's a Ducati Cup right now. They're talking about Suzuki coming back, but I don't know. They're every year I see those rumors, and every year they turn out to be false. So I don't believe them anymore. So
yeah. Well, that's about silly season starting, right? It's always after the summer vacation that all the crazy rumors start and the prep for next year. So that's a lot of fun to watch. So, Bob, what are your prognostics about? Well, I think this year is pretty much written, but you think there's going to be any changes to the ranking order, or we're pretty much ending where we are now?
You mean in MotoGP?
Yes.
I don't know. I mean, there's two or three Ducati guys, and obviously Pecco is at the top of his game, and he's on the best bike. So that's going to be a little bit difficult. But Bezzecchi is doing a hell of a job. Marini's looking good. Marquez's brother's looking good. There's a lot of people out there, but I can't see anybody beating Pecco for the championship. He's really in the zone right now.
Yeah. Well, one thing we can be sure of, it's going to be a Ducati.
Yes, I think.
it is the
Well, the only one that even has a slight chance is Binder, because he's riding the wheels off that KTM week in and week out, but he just doesn't have the bike to get all the way there. So I don't think he's going to win it, but I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't finish in the top 2 or 3.
Yeah, he knows that bike inside and out. How many years has he been with KTM? I mean, ever since the beginning, I think. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Moto3 he started with KTM. Yeah.
I think so, but I have to check. But yeah, I mean, he's a KTM guy.
Well, yeah, he just renewed his contract for 2 more years, so he's there through 2026 now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like their philosophy, like you mentioned, Bob. They have a lot of passion. They build good bikes. They build great bikes.
Yeah.
I just got the RC80, which is kind of like quasi Kramer with some KTM flavor on it, but they have engineered this bike to be like almost the perfect track bike.
Right.
Everything in it's geared towards having fun on the track, and you could feel like the philosophy of the company behind it.
Mm-hmm. Nope. I had an old KTM enduro bike, an old 2-stroke, and it was a fantastic bike. And back in the day, the enduro bikes were all pretty much Japanese until KTM came along, and they said, we're going to try to compete in this market, and they've really established themselves. I mean, they are equal to the Japanese these days.
I think the last two-stroke that was a real animal was actually the Bimota V Duo.
Yes,
I mean,
that
I
that
think
that's a one of my favorites. If you look at an Aprilia 250, I have one of those also, and you look at the wheelbase and you look at the weight, and then you look at the Bimota V2A, the wheelbase is the same and the weight's the same. The RS250 on a really good day will make about 58, 62 horsepower, and the V2A makes 120.
yeah,
So, I mean, it's exactly the same bike with double the horsepower.
yeah,
That was an unfortunate experiment by Bimota, because that bike was designed back in the day in the two-stroke GP era. The factories all had four cylinders, but Honda also made V twins for privateers, which were much less expensive to build, and that they could lease them to the privateers or sell them to the privateers. So Bimota, having a rich racing history, wanted to be a competitor to Honda and build two-cylinder GP bikes for privateers, and that's where the V2A came along. And if you look at the V2A engine layout, the V2A engine was originally a Tesi. So they were not only going to be in the two-stroke business, but they were going to try to get the Tesi onto the GP grid. And then they also came up with the clean burning direct injection. So that was also built into that bike. So that bike on paper was just an unbelievable bike. The problem was it took them too long to build it, which is kind of typical because you're a very small factory. And by the time they got the thing ready to go, the Honda managed to influence the FIM to change the GP rules to four strokes. So it was immediately obsolete. I mean, they had just about had it ready and it was immediately obsolete. So then they had to try to turn it into a street bike, and they did, but they had some issues when they made the transition from a prototype to a production bike. The two biggest problems were they had a crankshaft seal problem, so that it wasn't a perfect seal and it would leak a little bit of air one way or the other, which would mess up the fueling. And then also all the prototypes had Ferrari fuel injectors, which were not available in a production situation. So the best production fuel injectors they could find were actually automotive in nature, and they were too large. They would not get the flow in a very controlled way down at the very bottom end. So they had fuel injection issues, and obviously they built 150 bikes. They had to recall 150 and went bankrupt. So it was kind of a sad ending to a brilliant idea. I mean, since then we've got them running. All 150 of them are running someplace right now. Many of them were converted to carburetors just because two-stroke people love to diddle with carburetors, and they know how to diddle with carburetors. So if you're in a mountain or down at sea level or whatever, you can make it work. Whereas if it's fuel ejected, you're going to have an issue. So many of them are carbureted, but there's a few people that have a good fuel injection system that runs reliably these days. But all 150 of them are out there somewhere.
yeah.
I think I've probably sold 15 or 20 of them in America, and they're sprinkled around.
I'm a big believer in two strokes. I'm a big believer in carburetors because
Yep.
still to this day, I mean, if you're open to gas, I want to figure out the amount of air, the amount of fuel that's coming into the engine on the spot, and I don't want to wait for something to tell me, okay, I'm going to give you a pulse of this, which is not exactly. Some bikes are jerky, and some bikes are. It's just they don't give you, when you open the throttle, they don't give you what you want. So
Right.
I'm aware I'm old school, but the future. Well, what happened to two-stroke engines shouldn't have happened because there's not enough two-stroke engines out there to affect any environmental, to make any environmental impact. There's just not enough of them. but they were a
Correct.
victim. They were a victim of um, politicians, I guess.
Yeah, it was definitely political. I mean, you can imagine, they stopped making two-stroke chainsaws. I mean, how much pollution are all the chainsaws in the world going to contribute? It's not equal to one big truck going down the road. So
Exactly.
it was a little bit unfortunate, but I guess it is what it is.
Yeah. Nabil, you're muted.
Good point. Sorry, I had you on mute because the dog was exercising his right of free speech. But the issue I think is more of what the chainsaw cut, not the actual chainsaw emission, because they're going after trees like there's no tomorrow. But they don't see that as a problem
Well,
anyway.
we could also go back to two-stroke lawnmowers and what do they cut to? So
So
it's
Yeah,
lumber,
all those little devices. I mean, the two-stroke is so much lighter, it's so much easier to manage and rebuild, and it's just the right thing. I mean, nowadays, I think luckily all that now is going to be replaced by batteries, and from that perspective, that the battery technology is now getting so good, you can put batteries in all those little things, and they actually are quite useful pieces of equipment.
but
Whereas
but they don't
10
have
years
enough.
ago, battery technology
They
wasn't
don't.
good.
They don't have enough power to power the grid for everything electric. So they
Well,
don't
but
even
but the
know
same by the same token, how much total pollution do two-stroke lawnmowers make? I
nothing.
mean, how much electricity or two-stroke or electric lawnmower is going to take? I mean, that's not going to be the issue. It's going to be when 18-wheelers are electric, and every pickup truck on the road is electric. That's going to get the grid. The little electric lawnmowers isn't going to be a problem for the very same reason.
Yeah.
yeah. But even cars to an extent, because they equate a car charger to about four air conditioning units in terms of
Right.
draw.
Hmm.
And in a hot day in Arizona or Texas or California, they bring the grid down when
Really?
everybody has their AC on. So if every house had an AC and an electric car, I think the point stands of where Gal's saying, I don't think we can do what we say we want to do.
And not only that, but I saw a hearing in the Senate where the people that are in charge of converting everything into electricity don't actually know where the electricity is going to come from, and they don't even have the numbers because they just, they do it because they're told. Everybody's told electric's the future, so nobody actually bothers to crunch the numbers and say, wait a minute, where are we going to get all that energy from? Nuclear?
Well, I think there's a couple of things to think about there. One is to build out the number of end users is going to take a very long time. So the momentum is starting to build there, where the end users are now going to have electric vehicles, say. While that's happening, people can be solving the other problem of where's the electricity going to come from, because the two things are independent. And if there can be a breakthrough on where the electricity comes from, then that 20 or 30 years of building out the user base is going to be well on its way, and we can make that transition more simply. I think the bigger issue is going to be the transmission system, because no one seems to be worrying about how are we going to transmit the electricity from the source to the place where it needs to charge the vehicle. No one seems to be investing in wires and infrastructure and all kinds of other stuff, which I think is going to be the missing link after we get wind power and solar power and nuclear power, God forbid, to generate all this electricity. Then how are we going to get it to where it needs to get to? And that part, I think, is going to be a big problem that no one's spending enough time on.
It's a very good point, actually. I have some experience in that. I'm an investor in a company that manufactured a digital twin with drones and helicopter pods so they can survey power lines.
Ah,
Um, and the idea would be to do, now they send people with trucks and the people climb up the pole and they try to see if the connectors are still in good shape and if there's
right.
isolators that are broken and so on and so forth. And then they try to measure how far the trees are from the power lines and so on and so forth. And that's cost a fortune. I think they can do like 10 miles a day, whereas or 2 miles a day, I think, whereas this new technology can do a lot of miles. The biggest issue this company is having is we won't name the utilities, but they've gone to several utilities that said, we don't have the budget to do anything about it. So we don't want to know about the problems. They literally said there are laws that obligate us that if we know about a problem, especially if wires are going to hit trees with winds and so on, we have a year to fix it. And since we don't have the budget, we actually don't want to know about it. So they're pacing them to give them a very small amount of mileage at a time so they can take care of that and then gradually increase it. So, there's no investment there to be made to upgrade the grid that quickly. And then you have the recycling problem, which I haven't read anything that told me they figured it out. They keep talking about recycling some chemical elements from the batteries that they could recycle, but I haven't seen anybody really building anything that's significant in that sense.
Even building those batteries with the cobalt mines. I don't know if you read those articles about the child labor,
Oh,
but
and the leaching fields, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So making those batteries it's a horrible process for humanity. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think the technology is there. I know that there's a lot of re-education going on in the media and in the government, and I don't think the people that are doing the re-education of the consumers are actually fully aware of not only what they're doing but how they're going to solve the new issues they're creating. So, just my opinion.
Well, I think the fundamental problem is the Earth's got too many people on it, and
I didn't want to say it.
very comfortable. They've gotten very comfortable with the amount of energy they want to use and they can afford to buy. And there's really no one's identified yet a source for this energy and how to deliver it. But that's what the problem is.
Yeah, I didn't want to say it because it sounds horrible, but we do need to get back to 4 billion on the planet. I mean, we fished all the oceans. We did irreparable damage to every piece of metal, precious metal that's in the ground. So I think there's a lot of us, too many.
Well, we're diverging a little bit into Bob, your kind of area of specialty, which is industrial design and your experience. So, you want to tell us a little bit, because I was reading about your career, and you've been an inventor of many things and had a very successful career at IBM, and that kind of diverged into motorcycle. You want to tell us a little bit about that part?
Yeah, tell us how you
Well,
invented the iPad 20 years before Steve Jobs actually presented it.
actually, we did. It was actually a project that was an electronic newspaper. But at any rate, so I had quite a long career at IBM, 38 years, and the first half of that career, I was a machine product designer. We did communications products, we did printers, we did all kinds of stuff. And then I had an opportunity to go to Brazil for a couple of years, and we were expanding and set up a design center in Brazil for 2 years. And when I came back, I had another opportunity, and that opportunity was the best of my career. So they made me program director of a group called Strategic Design. So if you look at IBM as a company, we have or had the largest research division or business of any private industry company. So every year we had more patents than everybody else. All that basic research we did funded all the chips we used to make and all the different technologies we used to do. So, but one of the things that was starting to happen in the 1990s was that we were not being perceived as a technology company. All the technology press was centered around Apple and Microsoft and all these other Googles and all these other companies. And so IBM decided that what we needed to do was to build our image. So we set up this department called Strategic Design, and it was inside the marketing organization of all places. and they gave me a team of people. And what we did was we trolled all the hallways and all the IBM research facilities looking for cool pieces of raw technology research, science research. And then we would try to imagine how that could possibly be put to use in products or services or whatever. And we would do concept models of what these new things would look like. And then we would do little scenario boards of how they would be used. And occasionally one of these things we would actually build into a working prototype. And it was particularly fun because you got to work with, so in IBM, all of the design people work in commercial divisions. So if you're in the printer division, you do printers. If you're in the PC division, you do PCs. If you're in the display division, banking division, whatever. But I didn't actually have a staff. So what I did was I looked through all those divisions and I would borrow a young designer for 6 months or 9 months. And they would come to work for us on as kind of a perk. So if you were doing particularly well in the printer division, you got to go to corporate for 6 months or 9 months and get to play in this strategic design sandbox and really expand all the fun stuff you could do. And then you had to go back to work when that was all over. So I got to work with our youngest and brightest design people. I got to work with some of the smartest scientists in the world. And we just basically had a budget to go have fun, as long as and the only thing that we got measured on was how many magazine articles were written about our stuff. When they did surveys of people who we considered more innovative than we used to be considered. So it really was a fantastic job. And one of the things, as you mentioned, the iPad, one of the things we did was we thought about how information was being delivered to people. So you can think about, the newspaper in the 1990s was still a valid piece of printed stuff you got at the corner store every day. And we just didn't think that had much of a future. So we looked at it, we studied newspapers and news information distribution and all kinds of stuff. And the one you're talking about was actually done by one of my Japanese colleagues. And the thing sat on your breakfast table, and overnight it knew all the subjects you were interested in. And it would go out and scan the internet and find all the interesting articles about, let's say you're a motorcyclist. So it would find all these interesting news articles about motorcycles and download them while you're sleeping, because we didn't have the greatest, internet services back in the day. They'd be sitting there for you in the morning, and you get up, you get this tablet out, and you see what it found for you, and you read 2 or 3 things with your cup of coffee, and you go off to work. And so that was, but the form factor, and I hadn't really thought about it, but the form factor is exactly an iPad. And, before that, we invented the MP3 player long before Apple invented the iPod. As a matter of fact, I remember an article they wrote in Scientific American when they were talking about the beginning of MP3 players, and they showed some photos of the ones we did, and the comment was that it was actually a much nicer, friendlier device than the iPod was, which is, we weren't in that business. That was the hardest thing about that job, was that nothing we ever did would ever be built as a commercialized product, because IBM stands for International Business Machines, and business machines are only for doing business. So all the fun stuff, but the public can't relate to business machines. They can't relate to innovation in the business world. So in order to pique their curiosity and to get us some innovative credit, we had to do consumer kinds of projects that would resonate with people and it would make magazine articles. But we knew from day one that we would never build any of them. Now, we would license them to some people, but we still had fun. It was an absolutely fantastic job. I did that for 18 years until I retired. And the only reason I retired was because I just wanted to do more motorcycles and less computer products.
I also read you did some wearable technology also.
Yeah, we actually had many wearables. We did all kinds of stuff. We had, head-mounted displays that you sort of they'd be the equivalent of today's earbuds that everybody walks around with, but you would just wear it and it kind of came around from it sat over your ear and it just had this little piece of crystal that had a display in it, and it wasn't like you were completely absorbed in this alternate world. It was just sort of like having your Apple Watch attached to your head. So you could glance over there and see if there was some information coming in that you wanted to look at. And you could actually read short messages and stuff, but you certainly weren't going to read a book on it. And we just thought about different ways of getting that technology onto your person in a sort of non-intervening way that would allow you to get the information that we thought everyone was going to want. And as we look at it today, everybody does want, and it's everywhere.
Did you have any challenges with the technology? Because I know the technologies 20 years ago and 30 years ago, the processors weren't that strong, the internet connection wasn't there, the graphics cards were, almost non-existent. You look at today's technology and you go like, if we only had this, it'd be a hit.
Yeah, actually, what we were more concerned with was the connection to the information, not necessarily the quality of how it was being presented. The things you're talking about are obviously making that experience more rich. But what we were trying to do was just get you access wherever you were at whatever moment. We'll get you access to information, which was just really starting. I mean, SMS messaging was just starting to become popular. It was much more popular in Europe than it was in America. But that kind of a thing where you could be connected 24 hours if you chose to be was really kind of what we were working on.
Where do you see things going in the next 20 years? I mean, 20 years ago, you were doing things that people are using now. If you were to think about what you want to design, where do you think technology is going to be in 20 years?
I was thinking about that this morning, and the last project that I worked on at IBM was our Watson computer. And as a matter of fact, we designed the computer that played Jeopardy. As a matter of fact, my team and I designed the TV set that the Jeopardy game was played on, because that wasn't shot in California in the Jeopardy studio. It was shot in our main research facility in Yorktown, and we took the big stage and we built the stage for it. But the thing about Watson that was such a breakthrough was that it was a way that you could deal with what we call unstructured data. So everything that most people know about that has to do with a computer, you take a piece of information and you put it someplace where you know where it is, and then you go to that place and you look for it. But the idea of Watson was it was unstructured. You would just read into this computer every Shakespeare play, every cookbook recipe, everything you could think of. And then in a blink of an eye, that thing would search this entire massive amount of data, not a database. It was just a massive amount of data. And it would look for a couple of keywords. And then once it found the keywords, it would look next to those keywords to see what other keywords were there, to see if it was getting close to what the question was. And then it would rank the association of the main 2 or 3 words it found to the other 2 or 3 words around it that it found. And it would say, I think there's an 84% chance that this thing has something to do with the question you just asked me. And it would do that faster than the human brain playing the Jeopardy game could do standing next to him. And it actually worked. So in my mind, that was kind of the last thing I worked on. And so where are we going from here? Well, you just take that idea, look at your chatbot. I mean, the chatbot is going to change. You won't recognize life in 20 years when everybody we know can use a chatbot and can get things written for it, can find things that they don't know where they are. It's going to just revolutionize the entire world.
So basically,
But
basically
you'll
AI.
you'll also read though the dangers of that, because we're now starting to get to a point where who's in control, and you want to use it for good or evil. And so there's a whole bunch of social questions that people haven't really been taking seriously, except for the people that are in that field, and they recognize what's going on, and they recognize the benefits and also some of the potential disasters. But the average person has no earthly idea how big this is going to be.
You know what's funny? I'm looking at AI and all the algorithms and all the neural networking in there, and it's usually no more than 300, 400 lines of code, the entire algorithm.
Right.
It's not that complicated. It's just a lot of repetition, and a lot of computing power that today we do on the GPU, right?
Right.
So this technology that I think could have been experimented with back in the 50s. We just didn't have the computing power we have today.
That's yeah. Well, we had a lot of computing power, but it was absolutely centralized, and it was not accessible to
Yeah,
the average person.
yeah,
So you brought up a very good point, Bob, that I think about sometimes too. It's these thousand execs in AI that send this concern letter to Congress, and Sam Altman and Elon Musk, speaking about the dangers of it. I mean, what in your view needs to happen to have some sense of control of the direction AI is going to, so it is used for good and doesn't end up being this completely perverted scenario where it's used for evil, or even takes over in like the Terminator worst case scenario, right?
That's a extremely difficult question, because I used to believe in the goodness of humanity. And I have to tell you that in the last 10 or 15 years, I mean, there's so much evil going on. There's so much people that are, I mean, what's the truth anymore? I mean, it used to be Walter Cronkite came on TV and he told you the truth, or as much of the truth as he knew how to tell you. And there's absolutely nobody you can trust anymore, because everybody is so selfish and greedy, and wants to promote whatever their agenda is, that I don't know that you're going to get a consensus to be able to affect really good controls over this stuff, because it's not in the people who have the power's best interest to do so. Because I think they're going to see this technology and they're going to say, well, man, I can get rich with this, or I can move my agenda forward. I can do all this other stuff with this thing. And so there's not going to be a lot of incentive for people to kind of dial this thing back in. So unless the owners and the builders of the core technology decide to become socially responsible and put some limits and stuff on this, I don't see how this is gonna get reined back in.
I don't think there is a way to put limits on it, because all the algorithms are out there, open source on GitHub, so you can just download it, do it yourself.
Right.
As far as people are not, people are not telling the truth anymore. I think also there used to be a phrase that said, in the future everybody's going to be famous for 15 minutes. And it turned out that in the future everybody's famous forever, right?
Right.
You can just go on Instagram and you have people that really should not be on the internet posting their views and opinions that are really not based on anything but their own perceivement of the world. So
Correct.
you always have to know how to sift through everything that the internet serves you, which is the good and the bad, and figure out for yourself. The problem is that all that re-education that's going on systematically by people that have a vested interest in making you a consumer. making you more compliant, less resistance, less, thinking for yourself. Um, Shall I say, dare I say, less masculine, right, or less feminine?
Yep.
And you just have to sit back and say, wait a minute, I know what's going on here, and I'm not accepting it. So it's up for the individual. With a lot of power comes a lot of responsibility, and your responsibility is to distinguish: is this real? Is this not real? Who's behind it? Why? And just follow the process of people that are changing their mind based on the information they're exposed to 24/7, which might not be the truth. And that's the world we're living in, and I don't think that's changing.
No, no, I agree 100%. But I think that's the reason why I don't see um, a way to manage this technology moving forward. I think it's going to be up to the individual to either have some personal ethics or not have personal ethics, and do it the way it is. But to your point, I think once this is more prolific, every individual is going to have to start having a little bit of questioning in their minds and start to actually think, which I know most people don't want to do. People don't want to think whether this is right or wrong. They're going to go to the source that they agree with, and they're going to listen to more of the same crap they've been listening to. Whereas I think you really need to start to ask yourself and question whether what you're seeing and reading and hearing and is you're being exposed to is actually the truth or not the truth. And for whatever reason, people are reluctant to do that.
Well, it's time consuming and it's intellectually tasking, and you have to challenge your own preferences,
Correct.
which most people don't want to do that. And I don't think, I mean, it's got to start with our children because they're the ones who are going to be dealing with the brunt of it. And unfortunately, they've been used to being indoctrinated. And you have to, I spend a lot of time with mine just trying to make sure they question things and recoup opposing views to at least make up their own mind as opposed to being fed what to think. And, successfully to an extent, and successful with some and failing miserably with others. But I think that's where it's got to start.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think you should challenge everything. There's a in this country. I don't want to get into politics too much, but this whole idea of we're Americans and we live in the best country in the world, that is true, but we don't live in a perfect country, and there's a lot of things that could be improved. And when you travel the world a lot, and I've had the benefit of being able to do that, I mean, there are things in every country I've been to that are better than we have in this country. And the whole reason that we are in the position we're in is because, we're primarily made up of immigrants. And so they brought all these things to this country. And back when we were a little more accepting, we took the best things from all the different people that were brought to us. And that's kind of how we made the stew that we've become. But if you start saying that we are the best and we can't get any better, you've really gotten into a very bad spot. And so I think you need to challenge every single thing you see, and you need to decide whether you believe it or not, and you're going to put it into your personal stew or not. And your personal stew is who you end up being when you finally leave this earth.
Yeah. Yeah. I read this morning that Caltech actually lowered their standards of acceptance because many schools don't teach calculus anymore. And they were like, okay, so if you haven't learned calculus and you still want to go to Caltech, just take a free online course, which you might take or someone else might take for you. But it's just weird that what's happening where you just lower the bar for everybody.
Well, and I don't see how you can become an engineer without knowing some calculus. I mean, having been there, it's sort of like, I want to be a scientist, but I don't want to do mathematics. It's like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You have to do mathematics. That's sort of what this whole thing is built on.
Yeah.
And no, I can see where, they don't teach how to use a slide rule anymore. I used to be quite good with a slide rule, and we got replaced by the HP calculator. But back when I took my calculator into the exam, you could still take your slide rule. But, that's a tool. But calculus is a fundamental part of your profession. If you don't know how the math works, then you obviously aren't going to understand you might learn how to do a procedure by rote learning, and you'd be able to repeat it, but you're not going to understand where it came from and how it's actually working from the bottom to do what you want it to do. So dumbing down is really getting to be a problem.
Yeah, I was messing around the desk because I was bringing this one out.
my math
Still have it.
My math teacher forbade us to do this, use any calculator, and then my physics teacher loved it. So I would know to put the calculator on the desk on physics, but then remove it for calculus.
Well, yeah, they made us use our brains, God forbid,
Yeah. Should we switch gears? Let's talk about Bimota. How did that connection come about? I mean, you are actually, I look at your shop as an extension of the Bimota factory, because I had some, I sent a question to Bimota and they said, let me ask Bob.
Okay. Well, yeah, so where did Bimota come from? As I told you, I was in the motorcycle business from the late 70s. Back in those days, there was a small company in New Jersey called Motorsport, and they imported kits. They went out of business, and then Cosmopolitan in Pennsylvania started importing Bimotas, and they brought in the last of the kits, and they started with the DB1s in the mid 80s. Then they kind of got tired, and another guy came along in the early 90s by the name of Rochetti, and he was a doctor. And why he decided to become the Bimota importer, nobody knows. And he was a Bimota importer for 2 years. He knew nothing about the business, brought in way too many bikes, didn't have a dealer network set up, and he went out of business after 2 years. But that's the reason there's so many YB10s in this country, because, we probably had 40 of them, and the country really needed about 15. So there's a lot of DHs around. But then the next guy came along was Moto Point, and he was actually a good guy. That was Bob Smith. And he was the one that contacted me in the first place. And Rochetti had bought a container of Tezzy 1Ds, but he went out of business, and they were stuck in customs, and he never paid the factory for them. So there were 20 Tezzy 1Ds sitting here in America in the customs that we couldn't get out. And so the new guy said, okay, I'm going to buy those things out of customs, but I have to pay Bimota for them first, and then I have to pay all the customs duty, and I don't have that kind of capital. So he tried to pre-sell some of these bikes to raise the capital to buy them so he could get them out. Long story. But anyway, he called all the people that he knew that were Italian bike fans or had some Bimota association, and I was on that list. And eventually he sold me my first Tezzy 1D. And so I was one of the first 20 that got those bikes. And then he and I we did much work together over the years, and he retired when the BWA put Bimota out of business. He was near the end of his run, so he retired at the same time. Then when Bimota re-established themselves in 2003, I was already personal friends with everybody at the factory, because I'd been there so many times that they reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to be the importer for a while? So I said, sure. So then we had another guy, Jean-Marc Rousseau, who was technically the importer, but I was his largest dealer. And so I became his largest dealer. Then Jean-Marc kind of disappeared, and then I became the official importer. But the Bimota factory only has about maybe 15 or 20 employees total. That includes the 8 guys that build bikes, the 2 guys that work in the parts department, the 2 guys that work in the shipping department, Pier Luigi Marconi, who's the managing director, my best friend in Italy, Gianluca Galasso, who's the test rider, and the kind of, I would call him the chief operations officer. So every problem goes to his desk, no matter what it has to do with, he's the guy that's got to get it fixed. And then there's a couple of office workers, and that's the whole factory. So, I mean, I can call them on the phone and talk to someone anytime I care to. And so it's a very, very tight relationship. And I've been importing now, I guess probably 10 years. So we have a bunch of unfortunate situations in that type of business, because in America, in order to homologate a motorcycle to be US legal, you have to petition the government with a whole bunch of tests and EPA tests and safety tests and all this other stuff. Well, that process costs about $80,000 to $100,000 per model, and every model has to be homologated as its own individual model. If you have a 916 and then you want to do a 916 SP, you've got to do it again, because the SP engine is different than the 916 was. If you just do a Bostrom version and it's just a paint job, then that doesn't require any retesting. But if you do any kind of performance change, you've got to retest everything. Well, if you're bringing in 10 to 20 units and you have to pay $100,000 to make them legal, there's no way you can amortize that cost over that few number of units. So we haven't actually had a legal Bimota in America since 2007. So the way we get around that is that there's a whole bunch of laws on the books that talk about small volume manufacturers. And this was really pretty much set up for all the chopper builders and all the custom builders to allow them to build a product. It's kind of the American, let's help the small business guy with some rules. So the rule is set up such that you can be a small volume manufacturer if you make less than 999 motorcycles a year. And you have to get registered. You have to be internationally registered, because you have to create your own VIN numbers, and the VIN numbers have to be in the proper format so that every country in the world can recognize what the information in the VIN number is. And you also have to use a drivetrain power plant system that comes from a motorcycle that has been homologated. So if I pick up a Harley system and I plunk it into a chopper, as long as that Harley system is the same more or less as it was in the Harley, you can manufacture a bike using that system. So the way we do it in the Bimota world is that Bimota builds the bikes in the factory, and then at the end of the line, they take it to a special room and they take the engine out. And then they put the rest of the bike in a crate. They put all the engines in a crate and they ship them to me. And then when I get them, I put them in the workshop and I take them into the same special room and I put the engine back in. And I say, okay, now this is a Moto 1, because that's my company. So I will sell you a Moto 1 Tezzy. I'll sell you a Moto 1 KB4. I'll sell you a Moto 1 whatever. And it's got my VIN number, but it's legal. It's 100% legal everywhere except for California, because California recognizes that process, but the California Air Resources Board, the CARB people, they still want to do their own testing. That's the only state in the country that does not accept the federal standards. They have their own set of standards. So you still have to pay them $50,000 per model. And so what we typically do is we just don't sell in California. So we haven't had any California legal bikes since 2007 or 8. But people in California are fairly clever, and they figure out a way to take a 49 state bike and do what they have to do. So we have been importing, and I would say in the Bimota world, we probably sell 15 to 20 bikes a year in this country. The Tezzy H2, which is very expensive, $70,000, far exceeded what I thought. I mean, I was going to get 5 to 10, and we ended up selling 20. So that was a very successful product. The KB4, which you're familiar with, is the most recent one. And we only got them in late May, June. So they haven't been here long enough to know what's going on, but I've sold half of them, and which is only 5, where that's going. And then there's another version of that coming out in a kind of a stripped down cafe racer version that's coming out at the end of the year. We'll see how that goes. But the thing about Bimota today is, as you and maybe some of the people listening know, they are now 100% owned by Kawasaki. So originally, 3 years ago, they were 50% owned by Kawasaki. Now they're 100% owned by Kawasaki. And that is an extremely good thing. There's a lot of people that had all those Ducati-based Bimotas that went from 2004 till 2021 or 2. But in a modern motorcycle development world, every street motorcycle, to be competitive in the marketplace, has to have all kinds of electronics, has to have traction control, has to have anti-wheelie, has to have all this stuff on it. Because otherwise, people think it's a dinosaur, and why would I buy that instead of a Japanese motorcycle or a BMW or a Ducati or whatever? And then it also has to have ABS now by law. So if you look at the development cost, those two sets of systems, ABS and all the traction control electronics, has to be done per model. So you can't take an ABS system from one bike and put it on the other bike. It doesn't work. It's got to be specific to that model based on the weight and the way the brakes work and everything. And there's a very rigorous testing procedure. Well, it turns out per model, the development cost of each of those two systems is about $500,000 a piece. So for a small company like Bimota that's going to make 150 units in the total run of a model, they can't afford to spend $1 million developing two systems that, quite frankly, the user doesn't even care about. He just accepts that as that's just there. And so that's not helping them sell motorcycles and make themselves different than everybody else or better than everybody else. That's just the cost of getting into the game. So at the end of kind of the late 2015s or so, those systems became absolutely mandatory, and Bimota couldn't afford to do it. So luckily, Kawasaki came along and wanted to buy them to be kind of a halo brand for Kawasaki, and everything worked out nicely. So now Kawasaki in Japan develops the ABS systems, develops all the electronics. They also do all the exhaust system work. So all the dyno testing, all the ECU mapping, all that kind of stuff, all that kind of boring engineering backroom stuff that is really not, core to the essence of the motorcycle, but has to be there. Now Kawasaki does, and they can use the economies of scale that they've got and the vast departments that they've got to get this done very efficiently. And Bimota can now work on what they do best, which is chassis design and the overall concept of the platform and the exotic materials that they use and those kind of things that makes them who they are.
Now, are they going to go with Kawasaki 100% moving forward because they're owned by Kawasaki, or is Kawasaki okay with putting in a Ducati engine for another DB6? Or
I think the Kawasaki right now has told them, and I know for a fact, is allowing them to manage their business as an Italian company. So many of my friends used to work for Benelli. Well, Benelli was an Italian company, and they got bought out by the Chinese. When the Chinese bought them out, they became a Chinese company. I mean, they were run by the Chinese. There were managing directors Chinese in the Italian factory, and then eventually all the development got moved to China. Kawasaki is treating Bimota differently. They realize that they bought an Italian company and they want to be an Italian company. So there are no Japanese working in the Bimota factory building. There's only one Japanese in all of Italy that manages Bimota, and that's the chief financial officer. And he's in Milan, which is a 4-hour drive away. He's there because obviously he writes all the checks. And he's got to, make sure that when Bimota wants to spend money, they got to explain to him why they want to, how much money they need, why they want to spend it, and then he's the checks and balances for Kawasaki that because Bimota's gone bankrupt 5 or 6 times because they just spend whatever they want, they do stupid things, and then they wake up one morning and they're broke. So there's a certain amount of financial diligence that needs to happen to keep a good Italian company from hurting itself, and this CFO does that for them. But that said, they're allowed to do whatever they want to do. So I think it's technically possible that they could use somebody else's engine if there was a really good reason for that, or maybe more specifically, if Kawasaki didn't have an engine that would do what they wanted to do. But I think for the foreseeable future, they'll be using Kawasaki stuff.
Is there a chance we're going to see them taking the Ninja 1000 engine and dropping it into a chassis that's going to compete in World Superbike or even Moto America?
Well, I don't know. I really Moto America not. We don't have the reason you run in the national series is to help the national market. And we don't have a big enough market in America that if we got to be prominent in Moto America, it would fundamentally change the number of sales we have. So that will not likely happen for a very, very long time. In World Superbike, they had the BB3 out there 4 or 5 years ago, and it was actually doing very well. The problem occurred, they had a provisional license to be in a World Superbike, and they were doing very well in World Superbike. They were being run by a Netherlands team. And when they got halfway through the season, the FIM inspectors went to the factory and said, okay, show me the 150 bikes you built. And they couldn't show them the 150 bikes they built. They couldn't even show them 150 engines. So they became disqualified. So the World Superbike rules are such that you really have to be a superbike. You can't be a prototype. And I don't know that Bimota wants to get into the kinds of volumes that would allow them to qualify in that kind of a program. So they vacillated around in the late 90s. They had a couple of models, the SB6, where they actually got up around 800, 900 units in the total run of that, which many people would say, okay, that was progress. Well, what they felt was they watered themselves down and they kind of lost their identity. And I think that became too much of a commercial product for what they view themselves as a company. And so then, like after they came back out of bankruptcy, I think they refocused on where they were, and they really want to be a boutique company. They want to build 150 bikes per model and go do something different and innovate in some other way. And so I think that's going to be their business model. And if you're only building that few numbers, I really don't think you're going racing.
Okay.
Not in the way the motorsport world is.
Okay. Now here's a question that's a little far-fetched. If they're a Halo model for Kawasaki, and Kawasaki doesn't have currently a representation in MotoGP, and in MotoGP it's just prototypes, you don't have to sell as many, or any bikes at all.
Correct.
Is there any chance that Kawasaki would just go, here's a check, go compete in MotoGP for us?
No, I think the reason Kawasaki is not in MotoGP is because they don't want to write that check. I don't think it's a brand issue. I think, if you want to be in MotoGP, you better have a lot of money in that budget. And I think Kawasaki has felt like the benefit in their image and their marketing program from being in MotoGP is not going to, the benefits are not going to justify the expenses. And so that's the way, most big companies make that decision. And I think they've kind of made it in that way.
Okay.
I mean, look at Suzuki. I mean, they were in MotoGP and they literally had to pull out because they just felt like they couldn't afford to pay the checks anymore.
Okay.
Which is really remarkable. And we're circling back around to the initial topic, which was MotoGP. And what makes it spectacularly remarkable is that a company as small as Ducati can have such a powerful representation on the grid, but they also realize that racing success is their company. I mean, people buy Ducatis because they want. I mean, people buy Ferraris because Ferrari has got a glorious racing reputation, and you're more interested in wearing your jacket to dinner with a Ferrari logo on it than actually driving the Ferrari because you can wear your jacket every day. You're not going to drive your Ferrari every day. And I think people have in the Ducati world have such a powerful connection to their racing program that the percentage of the Ducati budget that goes into racing has got to far exceed all of their competition.
And they've been doing well. I mean, they sell about 220,000 bikes a year, which is not a negligible volume for
Correct.
Ducati. So they got some pockets.
Yep. Well, and they also have Audi money too. So it's not like it's all going to come out of what they're doing. I mean, it's part of they spread it around a little bit.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's win on Sunday, sell on Monday for them.
Yeah.
Correct. Well, and they're so powerful now that every Ducati owner has such an amazing amount of pride that it's self promoting itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why you see so many at Starbucks.
What's that?
That's why you see so many of them at Starbucks.
Hey, speaking of Starbucks, so I'm gonna be turning 50 this year, and and Bimota is gonna be turning 50, right?
Yes.
Both me and Bimota were born at the same year, so if you guys don't already know, I decided to spoil myself, and Bob, you can take the story from here.
Okay. Well, Gal contacted me the other day and said, I really like a Bimota. And I said, if you want to buy a Bimota, I'd be happy to facilitate it for you. Where do you live? I live on the West Coast. I said, okay, well then here's my local dealer. Go deal with my local dealer, and I'm sure we'll fix you up. And Gal came back to me and said, that's all fine and dandy. Are there any good deals out there? And I said, well, there can't be too many good deals because we're only bringing 10 in, and 5 are sold, so there's only 5 left. And we're not discounting anything because there's only 5 left. He said, okay, well, okay. And then, I mean, literally a week later, one of my customers from Virginia called me and said, hey, he said, I love this KB4, but do you have any Tezzy H2s left? And I said, I have one Tezzy H2 left. He said, would you consider taking the KB4 back in trade for Tezzy H2? And I said, oh, yeah, I definitely consider doing that. And so we worked out a deal, and I called Gal and I said, Gal, you are a lucky man. I said, there's only one used KB4 in the entire USA, and I now have it back in stock. So I can give you a good deal on it. And so we worked it out. So and he asked another thing, which is very unusual, but this is kind of a representative of the Bimota experience. He says, I would like to ride this thing on the track once in a while. And in order to do so, I need a GP shift. He says, can you possibly get me a GP shift? And so I looked at the bike. I said, yeah, I think we could invent something. And he said, well, do you think the factory would do it? I said, I don't know. I called my friend Gianluca. I said, Gianluca, I got a customer who wants a GP shift for KB4. What do you think? He says, I'll let you know in the morning. Comes back to me in the morning with a sketch and says, yeah, we can do this. Charge him 500 euros and tell him he can have it in 30 to 45 days. So, I mean, that's what you get when you deal with a company of that size. I mean, you can imagine, calling Honda and say, Honda, I'd like a GP shift, for my whatever it is. And they wouldn't even call me. But this company they really are a rider company. Gianluca, my best friend, is a 4 or 5-time Italian national superbike champion, and a really super guy, and they'll do anything for you. So it's all working out. The only GP ship KB4 will be heading west in 45 days.
Just in time for my birthday.
That's a great story for a beautiful bike. Now, the bad thing about it is this podcast, and we've done 10, 11 of those, has been a constant stream of insults from Gal against Italian bikes, because I have Italian bikes, and he laughs at me every time I have a little problem at the track or the bike doesn't start. So now he can't do that anymore.
That's correct.
Didn't you spend the last track day we did together, didn't you spend most of it trying to suck the gas right out of the tank because there was water in there?
Yeah.
Well, that's not an Italian problem.
Well, I did have two RSV4s, which were pretty okay, but then the horror stories about the valve guides just scared me off, and the bike wasn't that great on the track anyway. I mean, it was great if you rode at 90%, but once you started really pushing it, it was just too heavy and too soft and didn't brake right. And
I will tell you about this KB4. So my friend, I was in Italy on vacation last year, staying at Lake Como, and my friend Gianluca brought two KB4s up to the lake. And we spent all afternoon riding around the lake together. Well, obviously, I was following him because he can really ride. And I'm getting a little long in the tooth. But that is one of the absolute best handling, wonderful bikes I've ever ridden. The thing about the KB4, the way Bimota designs things, they look for basic principles. We talked about calculus a while ago. They know more about chassis and the overall concept of a motorcycle than anyone that I know of. And if you look at the KB4, if you think about it, a typical motorcycle has 4-cylinder across the frame engine, and then there's the front end. And in today's modern motorcycle world, you want as much weight on that front wheel as you can get when you design the bike. But you can only push the engine so far forward until it starts hitting the back of the forks. And so in between there, in a modern motorcycle, there's a radiator. So when these same two guys were at Benelli, they had a 3-cylinder that was across the frame. And in order to put the radiator in front of it, it negated the narrowness of the 3-cylinder. So they took the radiator from in front of it and they put it up underneath the seat, and they put those big fans behind it to suck the air through. Well, they took the same concept on the KB4 and they took the radiator out from in between the front of the engine and the fork, and they put it back up underneath the seat. And what this does is it makes the wheelbase on the KB4, which is 1,000 cc's, equal to or less than what you get on a 600. So it's the same concept that they had back in the day when they made the SB6. The SB6 has the same wheelbase and the same curb weight as a CB600 F4, but they put the GSX-R 1100 engine in it. So you basically, it's like the V2A and the Aprilia RS250. Well, this is exactly the same thing. So you could imagine riding like a Yamaha R6, but put the R1 engine in it. So the bike has become smaller and lighter, and it absolutely handles fantastically because they've got the geometry and the flickability of it because the wheelbase is so short. So I think when you get this thing and you put it on the track, you're going to be astonished at how well the thing rides. And the other thing about Bimota, which I don't think the other companies do, is that almost all modern design now is done on the computer. But Bimota has, my friend Gianluca is the test driver, and he rides that bike 8 hours a day for a year. And every single day, at the end of the day, he comes back and makes little notes, and they tweak something, and they tweak something, and he rides it again the next day, and he rides it again the next day. And this guy is such a good rider. It's kind of like, Ed or Divizioso. There's certain riders, or Freddie Spencer, that understand the mechanics of the bike and what they're feeling, and they're able to communicate that to the engineers so that the engineers can make an appropriate change to change the feeling. And my friend Gianluca is one of those people. So he rides this thing. Every bike they do, he rides and rides and rides, and they don't just ride it for 3 weeks and say, okay, that's close enough, ship it. He rides it for 6 months, or he rides it for 9 months. And every single day they do a little tweak, and they do a little tweak, and they do a little tweak. And at the end of the day, and Gianluca is also, during the summertime, he is an Öhlins technician for World Superbike. So he's inside the Öhlins big rig, and he's changing shock springs and fork valving for World Superbike riders. So that's the level at which he understands suspension and how it's supposed to work. So you are benefiting when you buy a Bimota. You are benefiting from the hours and hours and hours that he spends in the saddle, getting those things as good as they can be.
That's good, because I'm a pretty spoiled guy ever since I got my Carrie Andrew Special, which is a G6R that was especially built for me. And,
okay.
And that bike is hands down the best motorcycle I've ever been on. So every other motorcycle is measured, in a yardstick that is pretty unfair. And the Bimota, even the Bimota with its enormous price tag, it's still cheaper than the Carrie Andrew Special that I have.
Sure, it is. But by the same token, I'm not sure this is going to be quite as bespoke as the Carrie Andrew Special. So you're going to have to temper your expectation just a little bit, but I think you'll be extremely pleased.
So this is a road bike, so I'm going to use it as a road bike, but I'm not going to resist, and I will put it on the track a few times.
Right.
But when I saw that bike, when I first saw that bike, I wasn't impressed with the shape, because of the air ducts, and then I saw it painted, and it kind of grew on me. And now when I look at the pictures, I think this is, if James Bond had a motorcycle, that probably would be it. It looks bespoke. All the parts look, CNC'd. There's nothing there that is off the shelf, and everything is top-notch quality, including the fairing. I mean, everything's carbon fiber over there.
Correct.
So really, this is
the other thing about the bike is it's got ride height adjustment built in. It's got foot peg adjustments built in. It's got all this stuff that Bimota has always felt like was part of their DNA, and so the adjustability to make it yours is very simple. You don't have to buy aftermarket this, aftermarket that, aftermarket something else. It's already built in because that's the way they want to build something to start with.
Yeah, and Bimota was always something that was unobtainable for me. It was always, hey, when I get to this level of success or this level, the people that get a Lamborghini because they sold the business or something like that.
Right.
So
Correct.
it was always something that was, hey, if if Bimota is the top that you can get. So I'm very happy to finally get one.
Yeah. Well, I think you're going to be. It's kind of easy to get infatuated with the prospect because you read about it, you've seen it, but to actually receive it and ride it, it's one of the few products that actually exceeds my expectations, and that's very hard to do because I've really become jaded over the years, and I'm like Tezzy H2. I mean, I have never ridden a motorcycle like that before in my life. So, and the KB4, when I had it at Lake Como, was just absolute fun. So, I think you'd be very happy.
Good.
It's a beautiful bike, and it seems very well appointed.
Yeah, I mean it's got all the best stuff. It's got Ohlins. It's got OZ Racing wheels. You know these are forged aluminum wheels that just come stock. So you don't have to go buy aftermarket parts to a lesser bike to try to get the performance you want because the good parts are already on there. And as you ride more and more motorcycles, the thing that ends up in my mind as being the factor I'm looking for most is lightness. I mean, every bike I know of that's available today has got more than enough power for me to ride it on the street. But lightness and mass centralization so that the thing flicks easily are the things that I find to be the things that separate your standard production bike from some of the more exotic bikes. And that's where Bimota excels. So when you look at the bike across the parking lot, you don't necessarily see that. But when you actually experience it, it comes through to you because it's the accumulation of all of this stuff. You put, what do you say, 5 pounds, 8 pounds in all carbon fiber bodywork, but that 5 pounds or 8 pounds adds up. How much do you save in forged aluminum wheels? You save 5 pounds on the front, 7 pounds on the back. That's another 12 pounds you just saved. And so, if you look at the Kawasaki and you look at the Bimota with the same engine, you'll find that we're 40 pounds lighter. Well, that 40 pounds is a massive amount, and it's 40 pounds. A lot of it's reciprocating weight, a lot of it's unsprung weight. So these are the kinds of things that even though you look at it, you go, well, they're both 1,000 cc, blah, 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 blah. There's really a very significant difference. And as you look at that curve, you're hitting a point of diminishing returns. It costs you, in the beginning, it costs you $100 to save 5 pounds. When you get toward the top, it costs you $100 to save a quarter of a pound because all the cheap savings are gone. Now you really have to start pushing the limit to get those additional savings in weight. And that's what, sort of takes the price from, $20,000 to $40,000.
And it's
And
it's street legal.
20.
And it's street legal. My Gixxer is a race bike. So
Right.
that's that's the main difference.
Yeah, well, good. I can't wait until you have it so I can ride it and toss it on turn one.
Oh, okay. All right. I didn't think we were going to talk about those things, but
So you get it in what, 30 days? 45 days?
45 days. Yep.
my
I'm
my
going to
birth
the I'm going to the factory in 2 weeks, and I'll see the GP shifter. They'll probably have a hand CNC'd one there, and I'll be back 3 weeks after that. And by the time I get back, the GP shifter should be here. And as soon as that's here, I bolt it on. We'll ship the bike.
just remind them I'm size 13.
What's that?
Just remind them I'm size 13 in boots.
Size 13. Okay. Well, I'm size 12, so
There you go.
similar.
That's great.
All right. Any more questions, Bill?
Well, I have a feeling we could talk with Bob for a week
I know.
and end up with just motorcycles, but everything else in life. But at some point, I think we have to wrap it up. You've been extremely generous with your time. It's been a pleasure talking with you, Bob.
What are you working on now, and where can people find you?
Actually, I've got one project that's kind of interesting. I'm designing a three-wheeled car. So it's kind of like a in between the World Wars Morgan. It's a throwback vintage thing. And the chassis I'm having developed in South Africa, because in South Africa, they have a tremendous amount of technical expertise. And because the government is a little unstable, their currency isn't worth anything. So you can really get a lot of value from extremely good engineers. And so I've got an engineering guy over there that used to build GT40 replicas and other kinds of replicas. So he's a chassis whiz. And we've developed this chassis. So I actually have 15 chassis here in my warehouse here in North Carolina. And I just finished the clay model of the body at Christmas time last year. So what's interesting is I took a bunch of photos of the clay model and I shipped them over there. And then he's got a CAD guy that basically built the clay model in CAD. And now they're 3D printing a full-size body. So they 3D printed the full-size body. I went over in March. We tweaked it, we cut it, we pasted it back together again, and then we scanned it again. And now they're 3D printing the final version of the body. And when that's done, we'll approve it again, which will probably be at the end of October. And then we'll put a skim coat of some sort of filler on the top of it to make so we can get a high luster surface. We'll pull the molds from it, and I'll be in the three-wheel car business probably in the spring of next year.
What are you going to call it?
Well, I got a couple of different ideas, but I can't tell you what it is because if I'll change my mind, it'll be different. But and all those cars that are out there, the Morgans and there's some other ones, they're all kind of British. But I'm an Italian guy, so the inspiration for this car is an Alfa Romeo race car from 1938. So it's going to be a very, very interesting. As we all get a little bit older, you guys are much younger than me, but as we all get a little bit older, there's a lot of things that are working against us as far as continuing to ride motorcycles. For starters, your wife doesn't want to ride on the back anymore. Maybe you're getting a little gimpy in your feet and you're a little unstable with all the weight of the motorcycle. So this idea of a three-wheeler, not a trike where, you've got some goofy wheel out front and it doesn't go in corners, but a proper three-wheeler with a side-by-side set of seats in it will still, this has got no windshield, no top, no nothing. So it's as close to a motorcycle without worrying about falling over and enticing your wife to ride with you as you can get. So this is kind of an extension of being passionate about motorcycles.
Have you decided what engine you're going to put in it?
Yeah, it's Moto Guzzi's. I mean, they're the go-to engine because they're really automotive in nature, and they're light and they're torquey and they're perfect. So Moto Guzzi 1200 V twins, in keeping with the Italian theme.
That's going to make it lighter because there's no radiator, right?
Not only that, but we've managed to mate it to a Mazda RX-8 gearbox. So we now actually have an automotive gearbox which has got a proper reverse and 5 speeds forward, and it worked out perfectly that we could get the two bell housings to come together with a small spacer and an interposer in between them, and it works absolutely perfectly.
Do you have pricing on it already? Is it going to compete with the Polaris, or I don't know if you remember the Raptors?
It will be just under $40,000.
That's a good price.
Yep. Because if you bought the last generation Morgan three-wheeler, it was $60,000, 55 to 60. And we thought that was too expensive. If you buy one of these kits, you can get them for like $25,000 or $30,000, but they're really not very good. So my idea was you make something that's really good, and you bump it up over the stuff that's not very good by a little bit, but you stay well under the stuff that is only for rich people. And so I think we're going to do well with this one.
Sounds like we're gonna have to do a follow-up episode. Well, one where we actually film the bike and the KB4, and then the collection, and then have one
Yeah,
where we look at this car when it comes out.
I think that would be great fun.
How can people
Sounds
reach
good.
you?
What's that?
How can people reach you?
Uh, Actually, the best way is just go to my Bimota Spirit website. So it's just www.bimota, Bimota, Spirit, Spirit, all one word.com. And there I am. So you get to see my museum. You get to see, many of what I've written is kind of like a little monograph on some of the more iconic Bimota models. So you can read about a DB1 in its history, or SB2 in its history, or Tezzi in its history. And I'm also actually now producing books about Bimotas. So on some of the more iconic Bimota models, I have a really, really good friend who's a professional photographer. So we take many, many, many studio shots of one of the bikes from my museum, both with the bodywork on and with the bodywork off. And then we build a sort of a monograph book about that model, maybe 40 pages. And it's really nice because the quality of the photography and the printing is outstanding. And it's also, if you have the bike or you own the bike, you rarely see it with all the bodywork off. And the thing that makes a Bimota so special is all the stuff that's underneath the cover, because that's where all the magic happens. And so to have a monograph of the model you own, or just because you're interested in the motors, you get to see the absolute exquisite engineering that these guys have done ever since day one.
Nice. That sounds like the way to do it. Absolutely.
Yep.
So you're basically a walking, talking encyclopedia. Is that the word?
Oh. Yeah. I've been at this a very, very long time, and I'm extremely passionate. So in my spare time, I read about it, I research this stuff, and it just keeps accumulating and accumulating and accumulating. So when anybody worldwide has some Bimota questions, I usually get asked.
Well, Bob, thank you for your time today. We had a blast talking to you, and you have a lot of knowledge, and we're going to dig deeper into that brain at a later episode.
Well, I would especially like to do a follow-up after you get the KB4.
Oh yeah,
because I think that would be great fun to hear your personal experience, especially if you get a chance to put it on the track for a little way.
Yeah, and I think the first thing I'm going to do. Yeah, I think the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take it to one of Dale's track days in Chakwala, where those are pretty much private track days, no sessions, where you can just get to know your bike. So I think that's the first thing I'm going to do, even before I register it in Las Vegas.
Okay, well, I look forward to it, and I will also be able to get you some information on any kind of setup stuff that my friend Gianluca recommends to transform it if there are some setting differences, like, for example, tire pressures and preload stuff that is going to change it, because it's being delivered as a street bike. But, he tests them on the track all the time. So if there's some little tweaks and stuff that you can do that says, okay, well, I'm going to put it on the track, I'm going to make these changes, you can easily make those changes. And then when you take it back off, you put it back to a street bike.
Yeah, it's got supercorsos, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think it's 31, 21 in the rear, 31. That's how you start, and then I'll adjust it towards the day depending on how it feels.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Well, that's a bit lowish considering you're probably about 50 kilos more than Gianluca.
Oh.
Gal.
Okay.
No, I don't think so. Gianluca used to be a racer. Gianluca now is an Italian. So.
Oh, really?
He's not quite as slight as he used to be. So he'll give us some good information.
I think I'm about 190 now, dry. So
190, you may be a pound or two less than Johnny. So you'll be in good shape.
Well,
good.
there you go.
Okay, well, this was another episode of what's
The
the name
Edge
of the
Grip
podcast?
podcast.
Yeah, what's the name of the podcast, Nabil?
Edge Grip. I
Edge
forget.
Grip Podcast. This was another episode of Edge Grip Podcast. Thank you guys for listening. I know we're not doing those episodes fast enough. We're not recording too many. It's just that
We're going for quality, not quantity.
yeah, that too. But we just don't have the time. So I know, Nabil, you just came back from a trip overseas. I was overseas as well, and I was busy with a few things, and so were you. I know you guys are launching one of the companies, right?
Yeah, yeah. We're launching the Monkey Money Neobank, and soon there's going to be another one called Justo that follows. So it's kept us busy.
Okay, good. So we're doing as much as we can in the time span that we have, and we always try to bring you the best material out there. So thank you guys.